Morena, welcome. Whakataka te ho ke te uru, whakataka te ho ke te tonga, kia ma kina ke uta, kia ma taratara ke tai, e he ake ana te atakura, he teo, he huka, he hohu, te he mauri ora. Apologies, I don't think we have any apologies.
Yeah.
No. Have someone move the apologies, please. Thank you, Nicole, and second. Thank you, Shane. All those in favour? No, great. Extraordinary business.
Nothing notified, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Conflicts of interest.
Recorded.
None recorded. Takes us on to the confirmation of the minutes from our last hui. Can I please have someone move that they are an accurate and complete record?
Sure.
Someone that was here would be great. Sam, thank you. And seconder, Deborah, thank you. All those in favour? That brings us on to our actions, our action listing, which is great. I was just talking to Therese just pre the start of this. What we might do next year now is have another column in here that reference to if it's going to be within hui. So it's on the report date will obviously have a future date or the agenda item that it's within this hui that we're talking to, just so that we know where to go to within the pack or the item that it's going to come up with. So we'll do that for next year. So David, do you want to talk through the
pages
actions?
So starting at the top, the expensive policy, sensitive expenditure policy is dealt with today. Major projects were produced. The ones for today, Madam Chair, are all dealt with on the agenda, and we acknowledge the other three are due in the very early part of next year. And as we work up the work program for the committee for the first meeting next year, these will be reflected on that.
Sorry, Shane.
Morena koutou, tēnā rā tātou. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just with regards to the previous minutes, page 11, regarding land acquisitions in relation to the Darfield pipeline, I see it's not mentioned on that on the actions register, and just wanted to know where that will be, when and how that will be actions. And also, congratulations, commend the committee on moving from matters under investigation to an actions register.
Darfield pipelines in the special and the major projects. Yeah.
No other comments around the actions?
No, they're all on track, Madam Chair.
So that brings me to my update for this month. So this morning we were privileged to go on site at Foster Park and see a lot of dirt being moved, but you know, it was great to be able to see the vision of what that's going to look like. So very exciting for practical completion of that being about April, so pre kickoff literally. So very exciting for all those kind of football and hockey community. And I guess when I was sort of standing back and reflecting of the, you know, the whole kind of area, it is almost at that final stage of everything sort of coming together. So yeah, fantastic project for the community. We were also, as we were walking out, we were able to see the youth kind of hub, or a kind of next to the playground, which is great, because again, I kind of thought, you know, you've obviously got young children playing in the playground and you're almost catering for that next stage. So yeah, very, very exciting. We also looked at the car park and obviously addressing, because obviously as you create more exciting assets for the community, they always want to know where the car parking is going to be. So great that we've thought about that as well. Not too many health and safety risks to discuss pre going onto site, but good that we discussed them. You know, they were mainly around public and making sure that we keep the public safe. So apologies for that. Turn my phone off. Yeah, so obviously with all the fencing, we've just got to make sure that we keep the public out, so to keep them safe. And I think that even gone to the next step of making sure that any vehicles or machinery going in and out of site will be outside school hours, because obviously it's right next to the school. So great that that's been thought about. The other key kind of critical risk, which makes perfect sense when you think about it, but it's obviously the dust. And as we kind of move into the nor'west season, but good that they've put mitigations in place to think about that. So yeah, that was great, and I greatly enjoy, especially being just on the audit and risk committee. It's a real opportunity for me to see it. It's much easier to see things and understand things when you can actually physically go on site and look at things. The other thing I wanted to just quickly reiterate is just my thanks to Kaimahi, I guess, of the organisation for what's been, you know, a pretty exhausting year, I think, for all of us. And I think the way that we've managed to get through the year, I'm not trying to steal David's thunder here, but you know how we've always managed to keep getting through audit and risk committees. So whether that's been through Teams meeting or Zoom's meeting, is that, you know, we've actually still managed to deliver. So, and that requires a huge amount of work from the team. So great. Thank you very much for your effort. And also, I think if we look back 12 months of where this Audit and Risk Committee was, from the quality of, you know, we've still got a lot of work to do, but where we've come from, I think we've definitely, every month, we're kind of lifting the quality of the reporting. So again, congratulations to the team. And, you know, this is our last formal Audit and Risk Committee before we officially clock off. So thank you very much for your great effort. Stay safe and have a very relaxing and enjoyable holiday. So that's all from me. Okay, if someone move my board. Thank you, Murray, and second, Nicole. Thank you. All those in favour? David.
Madam Chair, thank you. Morning, everybody. Going to speak to items 1 and 3 of the manager's report, and Kelvin will speak to or answer questions on item number 2. So the first item, health, safety and wellbeing, I'm taking it as read. Just a couple of things for the minutes. Our health and safety manager, Dan, left us about 3 weeks ago. He's moved back up to Nicholson, and we just acknowledge the advances that we've made in the health and safety space while he was here. We're currently completing interviews for the replacement into that position. They'll be finalised this side of Christmas. Some of the key things that I just want to bring your attention to: the health, safety and wellbeing strategy comms approach is significantly advancing, as is the peer support network and the emphasis that we're placing on mental health and particularly peer support across the organisation, which is literally becoming more important on a daily basis. And the Talk It Out program is one of those initiatives. The OPSEC advances that are being made across the organisation in response to an independent audit that was undertaken about 12 months ago, and that's being done in conjunction with the various site managers. Our CCTV policy, we talked about a wee bit, Madam Chair, at our last meeting, and there's more being rolled out, and it's good to see the publicity for the Melbourne group a couple of weeks back, and I think it was either the Selwyn Times or the Melbourne News, but just the enhancement, and certainly acknowledge the Westview Special Funds Committee's support of that project as well. Getting really good response for our lone, remote and isolated workers policy. That's something that was long overdue. and is very much appreciated by our staff, and we're just doing an independent review into the effectiveness of that along the way. And the COVID response, we've had a working party. We have completed our risk assessment. In fact, we've done round 2 of that. We'll be briefing councillors around 12:45 today and staff 2 p.m. this afternoon in terms of our response to COVID. I think the underlying thing is flexibility. This will change on a daily basis as the traffic lights change, as public engagement comes and goes, and we'll be looking at a staged process to implement that. Madam Chair, the other thing I'd just like a wee bit of feedback, possibly not today, but over the next week or so to help Kelvin and I put the report together for the first meeting next year, is site visits. You've talked about the visit and the importance of that this morning. We've got some major projects ahead of us where we're going to be looking at feasibility, and I think it would be really good to get audit and risk eyes on some of those projects, both the physical build stuff, but also some of the operational stuff. Also, just want to reflect on some of the advances to back up your comments, Madam Chair, that we've made as a committee this year. I mean, I think this has been a tremendous year of success, and I acknowledge firstly, or the first half of the year with Murray as chair, and now yourself, the emphasis, the importance that we're putting on a number of aspects of this. Also look at the new staff we've brought into the organisation, Trish Beard from the digital strategy side, Keith Talentire, and also Jen Nicholson, who we're going to be introduced to fairly shortly to support some of the project management and reporting work. So, and just want to thank everybody for your support, your continued support. It's really important that we maintain the strong open dialogue that we do, and I really appreciate that. And for the record, just acknowledge that this afternoon we have another training session which is really focused on elected member exposure and elected member protection under the significant pieces of legislation that we are operating under. Most important, of course, being the Local Government Act. We're also going to talk a little bit about members' interest and also, if time permits, RMA reforms and a couple of other things. So, and final comment, this is the 4th of our training sessions this year. I think they've all been very, very successful. Are there any issues that you would like further training on during the first half of next year? So if there are, just again, come back through myself. So that's what I want to talk about, items 1 and 3. Kelvin, with respect to the OAG paper, other than acknowledging it's there and taking questions, is there anything that, no? So happy to take any questions, Madam Chair.
Thanks, David. Bob?
Yeah, just on COVID, David, in our facilities, are we going to put something up on the front door with exactly what you're allowed in them? Because there's a huge amount of confusion out there as to what they're allowed to have also.
Short answer through you, Madam Chair, is absolutely yes. Whilst there is confusion, bearing in mind they're not our rules, we're following national rules, most of which come into effect on Friday of this week. And again, come back to what I talked about, flexibility through the transition process. Yeah. We're literally reviewing on a daily basis.
Murray?
Yeah, thank you. Couple of things I think, not that we're doing it now, David, but the pipeline is definitely a visit, I think, is a major project for us. And yeah, just the OAG paper, I thought a really, talking briefly with Annalise before this, absolutely brilliant paper, I thought. And I'm actually wondering whether we need to workshop it at some stage, because I think it's quite central to us. I just go to page 50, there's a comment there that central agencies use performance information like a fire alarm, they ignore it until it goes off. I think that's a warning to us all. People's buy-in and trust, page 53, is also needed. Maintaining a trusted partnership with communities is basically where we're at. And then, sorry, bear with me, we go to page 59, broadening the suite of assurance products and tailoring the use. I think we're starting to see examples of that, and we need to test ourselves to see that we are actually delivering what we think we're going to be delivering. And to my mind, and this is not a criticism of staff, we need, and it's not a criticism of governance either, but you need to test ourselves on a regular basis and have that with external assurance, or perhaps not assurance at times. And we might see an example of that later in the meeting. So yeah, just my thoughts on that, but just a suggestion that maybe we could workshop that and get a better understanding. And Lisa, that it's just my suggestion.
Madam Chair, if I can just maybe chip in, members will recall that we started this calendar year with a couple of strategy days out at Untitled.
Yeah.
And maybe that's a way we could
Yeah.
transition ourselves into 2022, and maybe do that in conjunction with our annual review of terms of reference.
Brilliant. Thanks, Mary. Deborah.
Oh, sorry. I'm just trying to go back to my page 18.
How come she can use her?
Sorry. Just out of just with regards to the CCTV policy,
Yes.
is whereabouts, I mean, it's mentioned here that it's been updated since the last meeting. Just trying to understand, is that for all of our areas? Because I think last time we had a conversation about Darfield, and through Darfield Community Watch, they have actually put in cameras, and they have actually been very, very effective in reducing crime. And I think that that's where others in other communities are coming from with regards to CTV. But we do need a policy with regards to how we're going to use it, not only for our large buildings, but also for our smaller buildings that are in rural areas that may not have the volunteers accessibility all the time to protect them. So I just want to highlight that particular issue, that it's just not a staffing matter. It's actually probably waters on safety principles with regards to some of our rural halls and reserves that may not have the volunteers looking after them in the future.
Oh, Deborah. Yeah, I do. Thank you. It just further on the OAG paper. I mean, it was good information to read, but I was a bit disappointed there wasn't really an outcome of how you should go forward. And particularly for us, we've talked about full wellbeing and trying to measure that. And I totally agree with Murray, we need to workshop it, but I think we do need to be looking at how we're measuring our performance, because it is so hard to actually quantify, and that's why we've had discussions in the last few weeks about what we're providing for the community, but you can't actually monetize that. So I'm really keen to look at this further on our actual reporting on our performance, because I think we're doing really well with all the facilities and stuff that we're providing and the programs and all these other things, other than the bulk standard roading, water and all that sort of thing. So we should be looking at our performance and actually being able to celebrate on, where we're doing well and where we could improve.
Yeah, and one of the areas we're not doing very well is acknowledging what we are doing well, because there's a lot of that, and possibly through you, Madam Chair, to the Mayor, that's something that we can think about in late January at our strategy day, because I think it's got wider context.
David, sorry to interject, but we kind of do it in an ad hoc way, don't we? We know that there's a public good component to it, but we don't really ever discuss that formally in any meeting. I think you're right, Nicole's right about that. It's the social outcome, not just the pure monetary outcome. That said, we can't ignore the monetary side of things, because that has a social outcome as well. So it's how we interrelate those two factors. Yeah.
It's the way the community benefits as a result of our work, isn't it? Okay. That's right. C1 is Kelvin.
I'll just address some of those points around performance reporting and what we have to remember is reporting is the very tail end of this, and it's the final storytelling. Now, literally is storytelling, and the challenge you face is a lot of reporting gets driven by legislation, and that legislation often makes it difficult to really tell what the story is all about and those benefits. The other observation is, as staff, we often react to a comment or a question made within a council meeting, which then results in another report and another measure. And they are sometimes not always the best thing going forward. Yes, a report back, but it gets locked into a reporting cycle, and is it really providing future value? So if you go to look at a performance framework, and we'll talk a little bit about this around project management because it's fairly similar, but where we want to head is the ability to say, what is our objective? What do we want to achieve for this specific area we're talking about? Then what are the measures that you would design to show whether you're achieving that or not? And they could be quite different from what we're using today, which are probably quite traditional measures. But the other point is, if you look at our long-term plan and our annual plan, the number of measures we've got in there are just way too many to really hone in on what's really happening. It's just we'll go through the performance reporting shortly in the next report, and that's only a slither of the measures that we do have, and it's a large number. So to really hone in on what's going on makes it difficult with so many measures. But fully support workshopping this and moving forward. But look, I'll prepare some stuff for that workshop.
Sam?
Yeah, it's on those measures. When we created the long-term plan, there were 2 or 3 measures for each of the 4 wellbeings that we said these would be things that we wanted to, have a broad range of. So I don't think we need to let's look at those as a starting point, because we've already selected some that we think will be of value, and then it's thinking about how we actually report back. And some of those measures might only be annual measures. They're not things that can change every month. So just need to think about the reporting cycle.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Only sort of summarising what everyone else has said earlier, and I guess well summarised. Put my speaker on. Well summarised by Calvin. I read the OAG report, and they do put out very comprehensive reports, and you hope that you get to a place where you can read that report and almost go tick tick tick. We do all of that, or we know all of that. But I kind of read it, and there was a lot of content in there. But the 2 or 3 things I took away was understanding your audience and who you're actually writing for. And so obviously what Calvin just reiterated, and then also reporting on the right things at the right time, understanding the audience and telling a story. And I think if you remember when we went through the annual report, maybe 2 years ago, when we didn't do a line by line exercise, we did a page turn, and we reiterated at that time, are we telling the readers of this report, because there are people that read the annual report, it is more than just numbers. We need to make sure that we're telling the right story. So I think absolutely put it on the agenda for when we do our strategy, and we can look at it then when we workshop that. But I think every time we kind of make these incremental shifts and improving our reporting, is just be reminded of that OAG report. So as we move through, and we'll come to that when we get to the projects, is that are we telling the right story? Are we giving the right information? I think in my first HUI almost 18 months ago, the Audit and Risk Committee pack was probably 300 plus pages. And if I'm brutally honest, I was probably reading some of the content I was reading is within the scope of this terms of reference, why am I reading this? And again, that's why I just in my intro said that we've got better and better, because a lot of that, it's good reporting, but it's not necessary for this Audit and Risk Committee. And OAG's report was about the Audit and Risk Committee's role. So that's all from me. Thank you. So if I have someone move manager's report. Thank you, Sam. Get Bob seconder, and all those in favour. Great. Calvin, managers. Performance report.
Finance performance. Note, this was called the finance report at one time. We've just changed that to the performance report also. So we are starting to move that direction. Just before I start, just a reminder, we're talking about final meeting. There will be one further meeting on the 22nd of this month, We are in December now, which will be the adoption of the annual report. This committee will review the financials and the annual report and recommend it to the full council for adoption. And that'll be on short and sharp on the 22nd. Auditor will also be present that day. Okay, finance and performance report. Key takeouts here. Look, $20.5 million surplus at this point in time, which is 12 better than budget. Significant driver of that is coming out of the development contributions, which you'd expect with the growth in the district. Capital investment month to date, over the month, sorry, 8.6 million, lower than what we'd anticipated in the budget, and that gap to budget is starting to grow a little bit, so of concern. Just some of the key performance pieces. So building consents, same trend. We're up 16% on last year, and likewise with resource consents up 8%. Still having impacts with ability to staff the area and just to get through those consents, but the number did tick up again in the month, which was great. Facilities performance down on where we were at the start of the year back in July, but we're looking at effectively a double whammy effect here, where we had a brand new facility which was very, very exciting to have and a lot of people visiting, combined with the fact that we've had restrictions on ability to attend now. So it's sort of, one was very high and now the other was coming down low. So I think we're sort of getting closer to where the numbers should be sitting, and it will improve going forward when we have the passports in play. Just in a little bit more detail on page 72, development contributions are set up 9.6. It's really a factor of growth, and fees and charges, the regulatory income benefiting us there, but there's an offset, of course, in the expenditure around contracting of that service. I'm going to page 73. The only real key point here to note that it was really just a reminder of the flood costs coming through in the operating expense line, and we're having a partial offset of that through the income, and that's still being processed through some of those payments or receipts for revenue. Page 74, and a activity breakdown and margin. The flood event there again showing up in the transportation line. Wastewater, outstanding result, but it's all development contributions. So two major development contributions coming through. We had a settlement of a significant contribution towards a large industrial, and also the connection of the New Zealand Defence Force. Capital expenditure will leave the detail of the major projects to a future report coming up from Craig, but we are, as I said, running now 1.25 million behind the budgeted spend. And really that's spread across most categories. If we move forward to page 77 on the balance sheet, rates receivable increase on last month as you expect through the rate cycle. So again, when we get to the next month, we'll see that fall away. Sorry, the December month, we'll see that fall away. Not too much else to really report within the balance sheet. Their movements are in line with what you would expect. On the borrowing side and debt, as I mentioned at the last meeting, we've drawn down 5 million as a early drawdown for repayments of a amount of debt which is coming due in March, April of next year. And we got that at reasonably attractive money, so that was good. Council investments, no movement on those other than roll off of some leases. Into the performance metrics, again, the trend is unchanged. And as I said, this is just a slither of what the full measures are. We're just working on how to gather some of those other measures on a more regular and frequent basis. And some of those measures are annual measures, and therefore to report them here at this time wouldn't be right when we don't have a progress on them. Really the ones of concern continue to be those driven by COVID impacts around their facilities. And some of the down on the bottom of the page, the community and economic development pieces, very low number of events that occur, but really getting close to halfway through the year, and we're at that halfway mark, so just marked as amber. A subsequent page, building control remains in red, but a tick up on last month, which was great to see. And transportation, as we have said previously, that will continue to sit at amber, really with the state of and apologies for the spelling error there on the comments, it's fatal rather than whatever that says. That'll stay at that mark because nothing's acceptable in that scheme. So happy to take questions.
Calvin, Murray?
Yeah, thanks, Kelvin. It's just around the debt position, I guess. Are we continuing to get analysis, just thinking about the shift in from the Reserve Bank upward trend in interest rates? I guess we expect to see that continue. Are we getting regular outside review of where we think that will go? Because it, obviously as our borrowing increases, we're going to have more of an impact as we replace those loans. And I guess stage 2 of that is, we've borrowed early and absolutely understand why we do that, and it's fantastic. How early can we borrow? It's a conversation I've initiated before. You borrow ahead of time, and at one stage we could invest it more than we were borrowing at. I know that's probably frowned upon technically, but we obviously have the ability to borrow ahead of time. Is that a strategic thing we should be looking at?
We just to address that, we receive advice regularly from one of the consulting firms, and it's very good advice that they give us, some very good insight. Where economists are thinking at the moment is there's a point of around about 2 to 2.5%, which is sort of where they feel comfortable that this will end up heading to at this point in time. And remembering it was significantly higher than that prior to that, so I'm not too concerned around that number, and that's within sort of our budget areas. In terms of borrowing and then reinvesting, that's disappeared from us, so that's not available to us, but it would offset early borrowing and reducing the interest cost on that. Wouldn't fully offset or eliminate it. The money, the pricing we're getting from LGNZ, local government lending, it's really good money. It's cheap. So we'll continue with that strategy, but we will be looking to increase the borrowing early in the next year, but we're still in a good position. That's the thing.
So strategically going forward, we're going to have discussions, I guess, strategy sessions early in the new year about priorities, and of course annual plan coming up too, and there might be some changes there. We're still obviously in a strong position that if we want to borrow more, we're in a position to be able to do that, Kelvin, and it's we are. Yep. So,
and we need to factor in the whole Three Waters aspect of this as well, and how that works.
That's where I'm angling at.
Nicole?
This first one's more a comment or capital expenditure. So the highest variance is for transportation. I assume that's because we've got the summertime is when we do most of our roading projects, and obviously Gareth can confirm that. Yes, very good. So there is a reasoning behind that one. Now, just with the ones that you've picked out for being the highlights, why have you chosen those different metrics?
It's not very scientific, so it's really around what is available to us. So it's what I was keen to do is create a performance report where you haven't been getting these previously and they turn up at annual report time. I want to get in front of the game, and so that we're monitoring these and picking up where we do have exceptions and we can report on them. So it's a progress over time, which will see this expand to be able to collect these better. And as we improve our data collection and our storage data, will greatly improve that.
Cool, because what I would think, it's good we've got regulatory section, and I question whether we should be reporting on the resource consents and compliance as well in that section, because there are statutory timeframes the same as for the building consents, and that we need to make sure that we keep within. So to actually have that front of centre, I think would be helpful as well.
The resource consent, yeah.
Thank you.
Deborah?
Thank you. And thank you for the way that it's reported where it's coloured coded. It just makes it so much easier to hone in and actually ask a question. Look, on page 79, we've got community services and facilities. And I know that COVID has actually impacted, but when I read some of the other statistics, do we need to ask ourselves, should we be in this business competing with the private sector? And it's just the number of fitness program participants. The year-to-date target was 20,000, but we've only got 2,500. And the annual target is supposed to be 60,000. So I'm just honing in on that one because there's lots of other fitness programs that are run privately in competition. And I know that you've mentioned further analysis, but it's just a question, you know. How important is it that we actually, you know, be involved in some of these programs for the community if we're competing with the private sector?
Denise is here, but I'll have a crack at answering first. But there is, COVID has had a big impact around that on restrictions and numbers within classes. So we're having to have the distancing and so on there. But what I would say around us being in this game, yes, to directly compete with a Les Mills or a City Fitness on full-blown gym facilities, I think would be challenging at best. But what we're doing here is providing active classes and fitness programs which are at a low price point, which allows the full community participation as opposed to private owned stuff, which is quite expensive. We'll have a look at the numbers on it, but Denise, do you want to add anything?
I'll just add to that. Everything that Calvin has said is correct. And there has been discussions around the council table previously around this. Initially, council got into this space because there weren't providers of these services, and council has a commitment to across the life cycle programs, which other providers don't necessarily have the same commitment to. And so it's part of the whole suite. And as we move towards the greater emphasis on activation of spaces in some of the more rural communities, we are encouraging the communities themselves to consider whether or not there are businesses within their area or there are suitably qualified people who would be prepared to run classes in those areas in particular.
And I think, Madam Chair, it's one of those questions that you ask at due diligence time, you know, when you're considering a facility. And we did do that. And I'm thinking of Selwyn Sports Centre, which has been an absolute spectacular success, you know. And when we hear Dave Tippett telling us that he's getting 9,000 plus people per week, and the reason he's getting those through his door is because there is no other provider, or there has been nobody else prepared to put their money forward. So really, really positive numbers, I think, and the staff are to be congratulated.
Sorry, can I do it? Just following on from Deborah's comment, because I have, just looking at the metrics, I have observed with the Rolleston Community Centre, where obviously it's quite in a different space at the moment, but the target, which would explain why the target is lowered, but it looks like that we are getting a lot more use than maybe that we're expecting on our target. So just wondering if Denise can elaborate on where we're sort of at with the bookings there, particularly with everything moved from the sport to the sports centre, and we'll be moving to TRRT.
It would be fair to say that a lot of what is planned is calculated and anticipated, but but we have to wait and see. As you rightly pointed out, there have been attempts made to redirect programs and activities that best fit within the Selwyn Sports Centre to the Selwyn Sports Centre. But actually there are capacity issues there, and so there is some retention of that. We have gone out on an active promotion of I guess the reimagined community centre with a greater emphasis on community arts and youth activities. And when I got the last report, we had 52 bookings for next year. Having said that, and even though we are we're no longer having the large repurposing of this facility, with the Rolleston Library having just moved out, there is an opportunity to do some modest refurbishments that actually mean that our ability to let out spaces at least for 3 to 4 months in some parts of that facility will be slightly compromised. So we are just retaining as much as we can. At the moment, it's effectively a free-for-all in the sense that we have no barriers to people booking as long as we can accommodate them. But we are also mindful that in planning for next year that we have to that some of the facility won't be available for a period of time.
Sam?
Sorry.
You were for me.
What was it? Kia ora, Kelvin. Thank you very much for your report. I guess my comments will be at kind of quite a higher level, and I guess that's the beauty of governance and being councillors, is that our views are at a high level, and often we tend to sometimes get more into the operational sides of things. However, this is an audit and risk committee, so I totally understand that. The development contributions, obviously they're 131% ahead. Those development contributions that do put us ahead are all related to Three Waters. So are they? Is that correct? Not all, but the substantial amount of that do put us ahead are related to Three Waters. Thanks Murray for the questioning around borrowing, and as we move into the next year, that I think that should form a significant part of our work as an audit and risk committee moving forward, considering that we'll be losing that headwind, that tailwind and that income should the Three Waters reform go ahead and we lose that asset and that potential source of income. So I'd recommend that as a strategy for next year that we do work on what that looks like, especially around the borrowing part of it. I just had one question. It was something that Deborah brought up around the community aspect, and as we clearly see here that a major portion of the funding for the community aspect, or our responsibility back to our community, is largely funded by the general ratepayer. If we lose that income coming from say the Three Waters asset, where's that income going to come from? So I think that also should be a major part of the work moving forward. I know that it continues to be at a rates burden to our ratepayers, that continued use, and while we have a responsibility, we're also responsible as audit and risk committee to make sure that they do wipe their face each and every one of these facilities.
Just to address those points, the development contributions that are coming in the way of waters, they're being gathered to pay for the capital that we're investing in waters. The water assets disappear, we would have no ability to, or no need to, raise that money to support that. So while yes, that income disappears, we couldn't claim it anyway. There's nothing to claim it against. There's also no cross subsidisation coming from waters to fund any other assets. So the waters, as you see here, sit in their own account. Therefore, we're charging rates relating to waters for water asset purposes and the supply of that. So yeah, while our income will fall and our assets will fall, it shouldn't have an impact on the ratepayer.
Thanks, Cal.
Sam?
Yeah, my question is around the type of discussion we want to be having at this meeting. and the nature of why we do these things and the reporting that we've got. I think we'll just see how good the reporting back to us is, because all of the whys of why we're doing it was set out in the annual plan or through the long-term plan process and determined by council, and have sort of set these things in motion. So for us as a subcommittee, it's really the measurement of how, and then some questions and answers around the performance aspect of it, rather than we continually sort of go down to how we might do it differently or change and manoeuvre, which are good questions to ask, but I guess is this the right place to be asking those things? And I don't think it necessarily is, but we probably just need, as a group, think about, if not here, then where, and how that's done constructively to allow this meeting to function well, but also for all councillors to be a part of these types of discussions.
I guess I can just chip in answering that too, is that just be mindful that when we say we need to workshop that, and I think that's the danger when we as a subcommittee think we need to do this, because actually a lot of the time it's management need to do this, and we need to get a level of confidence from management. Not doubting, I think a workshop is a great idea, and I think we should do that at least once or twice a year, whatever needs to be on the agenda. But it's that jumping in and thinking that we as a subcommittee need to solve things or fix things, because that's not our role. Our role is to make sure that we get enough level of confidence so that we can deliver our commitment and the expectation per our terms of reference. So if ever in doubt on what this committee should be doing, go back to the terms of reference, and the scope is what is in that terms of reference. So yeah, that's kind of my 5 cents. Any other questions for Calvin's report? I just had one question without, again, sorry, apologies if it's a stupid question, but we're all allowed to ask stupid questions, one per hui. Yeah, this is my stupid question, and then there'll be no more stupid questions. 3 waters, transition costs. So just as we move through this transition phase, there will be cost, whether that's direct or indirect. Is that what the government initial contribution way back when is meant to be covering, or that was just that contribution made by government a long time ago was obviously for that phase? And is there an expectation that there's going to be additional cost to move through the transition, and how is that absorbed?
So there's 2 lots of funding. One was 2 billion and the other one was 500 million. The latter was specific to transitional costs. We can draw down on that from 1st of July next year, can't we? So the issues that we're dealing with is understanding what those transitional costs might be, the impact longer term on our ability to deliver our program, particularly through to 30th of June 2024, stranded overheads, and we've talked about those and identified those with council previously. And finally, and most importantly, how we're going to use our share of the government allocation, which is $22.6 million. And that'll be a conversation for council very early in the new year, and will be factored into our annual plan for 22-23.
Just to add to that, I think the key for this committee will be, once we're into that transition program, we'll be monitoring that program is succeeding. It's just like any other project, and it'll be reasonably long run, because it'll be quite a time for us to gather all the information that we'll need to gather to send on to the new entity, and likewise how our systems will unravel in the data that will go across. So it'll be quite a substantial project.
Great, thank you. If no other questions, can I have someone to move the finance and performance report, please? Thank you, Murray, and seconder, Nicole. All those in favour? Great. Right, project.
Right, program and project management. Before I start here, I'd like to introduce Jenny Nicholson. So she's joined us in the last few weeks as the performance and program manager, who will be focusing heavily on how we deliver projects and programs and the performance aspect, which we've been talking about earlier. So all quite relevant stuff to what has been discussed this morning. I won't have Jenny present any of this at this point, but she's beavering away really well at delivering some framework pieces that will really drive us forward, and we're moving at quite considerable pace, which is great. Right, the purpose of this paper was twofold. One was around really setting the scene for what a project management framework will look like and the steps that we're taking to get to that point, and secondly, to address the post-implementation review point that's been sitting on the action list for some time, and just what they are and how we'll go about that. Really backgrounding us, so $0.7 billion in a capital program over the next 10 years is significant. Therefore, processes and approaches and frameworks need to be appropriate for that scale of delivery. And as a council, which I think I've spoke to the councillors about previously, we've grown very, very rapidly, and we need to be able to move along with it. The ways of doing things previously will probably not suffice, and not to say that they weren't the way to go about it, but as you get large, you just have to adapt and move. A project life cycle, what we're looking to do here is to focus Jen's role towards this, but it's just sort of assessing in the early months, is really assessing what we've got today and what maturity level we're at, and within that we'll look to where we need to be in maturity. And if you take a five stage scale to something, 0 being poor and 5 being excellent, outstanding, it's not to say that we want to be sitting on that 5 for everything. There'll be certain things which are a greater focus for us or a greater risk depending on our profile of where we want to be. So we'll develop that, and we'll bring that back as an information paper to this group at a later date. We want to customise the way projects are delivered and the life cycle to fit the council and what we do. It's important that we make it work for us as opposed to cookie cutting it and throwing something in that doesn't work. Really about enhancing and developing our documentation and making sure the tools we're using are fit for the purpose, but more importantly, fit for the future, so that we are really best dressed for going forward. And most importantly for this group is really designing an assurance program which has the appropriate controls in place and the management mechanisms there, so we can actively manage and report back on where we do potentially have issues, but more importantly, where we've had successes also. Project management life cycles and frameworks are fairly typical to no matter what sort of delivery mechanism you might use. So typically you go through 4 phases of a project, which is initiation. So on page 82, there's a detailed diagram of it. I won't go into detail of that, but right along the bottom of that, so it shows the documents which would typically go with those stages. It's not all the documents, but it's sort of the main documents, and really some of the tasks and activities that occur within it. So first stage being that initiation, and I've just put getting started. So it's understanding what we're trying to do, what's the problem we're wanting to solve, what's the opportunity for the community we're trying to address, and is it viable? And taking that early step. And often this is a stage which, if poorly done, results in a poor project at the end, because you've gone out there and say, yeah, we'll head away and we'll do this, it'll be great, without really testing it, and then egg on the face later on. And as elected members, you certainly don't want to have that. So that's the safeguard on that. The planning aspect, the what, when, and how. So how are we going to deliver? What's the scope of this project? What's the project delivery methodology? Typically here will be sort of a waterfall type project, but if you're in IT or something like that, it may be agile. So different methodologies can be used. That'll set the key milestones, identify the resources required to enable you to then go and execute. And in the diagram, I've broken execution into two pieces, one around actual execution of the project. So shovels in the ground, feet on the ground, that type of thing, doing what they need to do to deliver within time, cost, and quality. The other piece is around project control. And it's making sure that the right control mechanisms are in place so that if something does go wrong, you can identify it early and you can take rectifying action quickly. And the final piece is the close, and I'll sort of call it wrapping it up. And that's where the PIR piece comes into it. Typically in a project, and a lot of projects will, right, I've done what I need to do, pack up and leave. But have you successfully handed it across to the new owner? A great example at the moment is Tiara Tier. We've got Denise and her team moving in, Douglas's team moving out. There's been a nice orderly transition and handover, so it's operating well. But that handover will go on for a longer period, making sure that warranties are in place, that those teething issues that a new building will have are ironed out and addressed. So typically, project won't end the day that operations take it over, it will run a little bit longer. Then you'll drop into delivering a closeout report, and that's really that immediate finish of the project where how went, how you operated is really fresh in people's minds, and you can take that in. Which then leads to the post-implementation review. So within here, I've gone through, broken it into a few steps and stages, but what you're trying to do here is understand what went well, has it delivered what we said it would deliver, and is there any lessons we can take out of this? And those lessons could be something we did within the project, or a lesson on how we can get greater benefits out of it, out of the delivered project. A PIR can't happen immediately after the project closes because you haven't had an opportunity to see if the benefits have landed or bedded in. So you typically in a scale of 6 to 12 months, depending on the type of project, to enable you to see the benefits. Who should perform a PIR? It needs to be someone independent of the project. And they're facilitating the conversation and asking the tough questions, the difficult questions, and probing where they need to probe. But it doesn't absolve those involved in the project from being involved in participating and getting a broad spectrum of people involved. So that's making sure that all the key stakeholders are there along with those that are delivering. We talked about when it should be delivered and completed. And ideally, it's sort of in a two-phase piece. You capture the here and now as the project closes, stuff fresh in the mind, and then you pick up the next piece later on. And then what should be included, and Jenny's created a really nice template which will end up at this committee. So from a PIR report-wise, we intend to deliver a one-page which covers off all the key aspects, around the delivery. Did it hit the budget? Did it hit the timelines? Was the quality where we expected it to be? What were the health and safety metrics and observations? And then has it hit the benefit targets, and are they clear? And then most importantly, the last section of that one page will be what are the lessons learned? And so there'll be the aspects of what went really well and what we're taking forward as learnings into the next projects. That will sit on top of a larger report, which will be really for the purpose of the sponsor and for management to deliver, and for you as governors to drill in should there be questions around things. But the summary report is what we want to get in front so that you can get a nice snapshot quick and easy without having to dive into a whole lot of detail. But if you wish to see the detail, you can. Timeline and what's included. So as I said, probably 6 to 12 months after a project completes. And where I'm sort of targeting PIRs coming back to this group is where they typically be in the major projects report. So greater than 1.5 million, or complex to deliver, or of very high profile. First PIR will come back in, it's been completed at the moment, and it's the Selwyn Sports Centre. And I intend that will be back in the first quarter of the next calendar year, at the tail of that quarter, as our first report back. And really we're using it as a learning opportunity as well for us in completing these, and also for governors to understand the process and how we've gone about it. So I'll take any questions, and Jenny, jump in if you want to answer anything.
Murray.
Yes, thanks, Kelvin. I'll move the adoption of the report. This is fantastic, Kelvin. I think this is a step, that's been long needed, and congratulations on the report. It's very succinct, but also seems to cover all the bases. And I'm just thinking the commentary we had there around, I think page 84, the benefits, and that we just talked about that before. Some of those benefits are non-monetary, and if we're achieving the outcome, and the discussions around before Sam about setting a clear direction before we approve a project is very true. That's when we should be doing it, but when we get to this stage, that's when we see whether we have delivered it, and that's the social benefit. So look, I think this is fantastic, and welcome aboard, Jenny, as well. Look forward to seeing you more around the table and delivering these outcomes. So I just think that what have we got, 3 pages here, but it contains far more than that, Kelvin. It's I'm really enthused for where we're going forward with delivery of major projects, and being able as a governance group to feed in to this process ahead of time so that we know what are the outcomes we're looking for. I think is really crucial. So yeah, well done.
Shane.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. Kia ora, Kelvin, thank you. Yep, agree with Murray on all of his points, and happy to second the report. You've satisfied my questions around timeline, and obviously the Selwyn Sports Centre, once that finishes, you'll be working to a work plan of what comes up next, and perhaps that's Te Ara Atea. Do you see this type of reporting also being of use with the JVs, like the town centres and things like that? Is it able to be adapted to that type of development?
Well, certainly there'll be a PIR around the work we're doing around the town centre, and given not necessarily the relationship aspect with our partners there, but because we're, it's a contractual thing, but there'll be a relationship thing which you could report back on quite easily.
My 5 cents worth. As you can imagine, I was very, very excited to read this paper. I mean, 2, 3, 4 pages. It was the best 4 pages I have read in 18 months. Because when you read that number of $0.7 billion in major projects, it's taken us a long time to get here. We should have been here a long time ago, to be brutally honest, but we are here. So it's just so exciting. So, I was like, yes, we've got here. So great things to come. I mean, it is only 4 pages, but there's a lot of content in there, and it's a big mountain to climb. So welcome, and I'm very excited to have you on board. What I would like to include in scope, which may be part of that PIR process, and we'll get to it when we get to the major projects, but is that to look, and it goes back to the OAG report as well, but the quality, Kelvin didn't give us a Band-Aid approach, but he developed the project dashboard, which was great, so it was very consolidated, and it gave us a kind of dashboard per project, which is great, but it's the quality of the information within. And that's where I still think there's a lot of work that needs to be done, because every month I'm reading, I'll kind of get to the next agenda item, but I would like the PIR in the first instance. I'm not sure if it's a slight extension of scope, but to look at the actual, maybe over the life cycle. Yes, we're talking about life cycles of a project. Great. It might be through that life cycle of the project that you look at the reports that have come up to the Audit and Risk Committee. It might be 1 a quarter, or even just a couple, to look at that and go, okay, we were at this point of the project at this time, or even when I'm not trying to tell you how to do a job here, but, at crucial points of that project, what was the quality of the information that was coming up to this Audit and Risk Committee? Because I think there are some real lessons learned, and I think the dashboard approach has been a great step change, but looking at the information that was coming up, because I'll get to some of that in my next agenda item. So if it's probably in scope, but if it's not in the first instance, could we do that? Because I still think there's some work. And I think, again, if we go back to that number, you know, 700 million, $0.7 billion, I kind of think that in 1 to 2 years' time, we're not going to be talking about one person, we're just going to be talking about a PMO office, you know, with a whole team of people that are going to be doing this as their day job, because it's such a big number. And if that's what's in our long-term plan, then it's not one person, it's a whole team of people. So yeah, very, very exciting day. So
Just to address those points, well, the point around the reporting, that's certainly within the scope of the PIRs, and it's not just the reporting that comes to here, it's the reporting that goes to the various stakeholders within the project. So that is certainly included, and won't be any surprise, but it will be a finding that is probably a weakness in some of what we're doing.
great, so I think we had a mover and a seconder, so all those in favour? Aye, great. Takes us to the sensitive expenditure paper.
Okay, sensitive expenditure. This is a report back on how the compliance to policy is heading. Can report it is being complied with well. Within the monitoring of effectiveness, just to list off a couple of the controls of how this works. We've got an accounts payable staff who, well, first off, we don't carry credit cards around the organisation. There is one credit card which is used for online purchases. For convenience wise, probably a lesser thing, but from a governance and control aspect, it's a positive thing. We do have prepaid cards which we use where we need to use credit cards also. The monitoring of it, the accounts payable team do an absolute stellar job in charging in through the detail of these reports, and I quite often receive questions from that staff, and Craig Moody, also our accounting manager, receives questions around is this appropriate or not, and those discussions are occurring. So they are getting into really great detail, which gives me quite great confidence around what's going on. We've developed a Power BI. Power BI is a reporting tool which brings in large data sets and enables you to report on them very quickly and concisely. I would have brought it up on the screen, but there's a bit of sensitive stuff that sits on that. But it is reporting on staff expense claims, travel and conference expenses, other travel related expenditures, which, as you imagine with COVID, has been incredibly low this year. So we're saving money on travel, and contractor expenses. And it also has, which I missed out here, is the governor's expense claims on there also. So it's a one page, sits on a dashboard, and I can monitor that at any stage, and managers have the ability to access that also. So that gives us great confidence on what's going on and enables to drill in. Through this review, the other thing is, of course, the auditors are very keen with the OAG to get through this stuff and look at it. We've had nothing raised at this point through the audit, but they probably haven't quite got to this amount of detail yet. A couple of opportunities for improvements through this review: donations, cohort, and staff sponsorship. We have policy around this which enables members of the ELT to approve these payments to occur. What I'm suggesting, and I've already asked for this to be implemented and it's underway, is a register of those type of payments, just so we can monitor them for consistency across the executive team to make sure that we're not authorising something high level in one area, low area, and making sure we're moderating our approach and reviewing those. Craig Moody is all over this stuff. And the other pieces are policies and procedures. While the content is right within it, it's just not sharp, concise, and easy to use language. And this is just one thing I'm sort of hold on at the moment, is getting our policies to be policy statements and our procedures to be procedures, and not mixing the two. and getting them in a way that it's nice and easy and short and succinct to read. Because if you're faced as a staff member with a policy which is 10 pages long, the likelihood of you fully reading that is low. So getting those to be very useful. The training we have around these is good and confident with it. I'll just take any questions.
Kelvin, you've just had the training. How regular? Like,
We'll normally hit that twice a year, but new starters coming on board with part of the training they go through with our Compass module, which is their training module, they have elements of sensitive expenditure and conflicts of interest going through that as well.
yeah. So that ties in with our fraud, awareness and everything as well, because we can think back historically that it's been those training exercises that have caught things, and as I say, historic. Hopefully not now, but I think it's shown its worth, hasn't it?
Yeah. And a key point around fraud awareness is less so about, it's actually understanding the people you work with, and if something seems odd or someone's going through some issues or things like that, they're often red flags just to keep an eye on what's going on.
Shane?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kia ora, Calvin. Thanks for the report. Just lately, I was sitting around the table with some professionals, and we were talking about how when you get elected as councillors, we go away for a night and come together as a team and discuss strategy for the future. The first comment that they made was, spending up ratepayers' money and that sort of thing. So my question is around on the page 86, transparency, and where can ratepayers find some of the transparency that's spoken about?
That's generally comes out through a Legoima process. I would need to have a look at what we are reporting, but there probably could be some improvements made on that. What I can tell you is it's pretty frugal from an organisation.
I guess the comment is that any event like that costs money, number one. Number two, it's not unusual for the media to put through a Legoima request, how much is the Mayor and the CE spending? We normally get one of those every 18 months or so we're probably due, actually. I just want to, the key thing in this report is in the middle of page 87, where Kelvin said there have been no occurrences of policy breach. And that's really quite significant because Audit put a lot of effort into significant expenditure. And you'll recall that they've addressed that with us, and we put some programs in place. So this is a real good newspaper, this one.
No. Move, great. Second letter, thank you, Nicole. All those in favour? Right. Subcon report.
Me again. So really, this is just a information for the councillors of their performance report for the first quarter of the 2022 financial year. A couple of key highlights come out of this. Revenue is up for them, which is great, and their net profit before tax and amortisation is up significantly on where their budget was. Net cash flows are lower than budget, and this is due to some capital expenditure, which is earlier than anticipated and above budget. Also, a lot of that capital expenditure is going in to support the Darfield Pines pipeline. So good news for the council. Other non-financial aspects, we heard at the AGM and saw images of the walkway that they've produced down in Wanaka, and they are looking to continue to remain down there and establish a base. And COVID-19 continues to be a key risk for their performance, and given moving into the traffic light framework, suspect the removal of any potential of lockdown is useful for them. If there's any questions, I will attempt to answer them.
I've actually got a question, sorry. It seems to me, I know we get this report every quarter, so I'm probably raising it now going, we haven't said this previously, but you always kind of get new things, but it seems quite light for a report. But do you feel like you're getting enough information? I mean, I know we met with them and they presented, so we got a lot of information around their strategy and delivering to their strategy in the last TUI, I think. But as the quarterly report goes, it seems to obviously focus on their financial performance, which is great. We want to know about that. The other, I mean, without risk getting too detailed, they've obviously mentioned no wins for the quarter, but I'd quite like to know if there's been any losses or major losses for the quarter. Be quite an interesting, useful measure. But is there anything else that's non-financial against their kind of statement of intent or, level of expectation that, you as management think you would be useful to get? It seems a bit light.
From a report, yes, but noting this is a public report which is going to be put on our website after this meeting to display to the public. So there's a lot of items which go on that are sensitive to their operations because they're competing with other corporates. From a management point of view, we are well briefed and across it. Gareth, for instance, is in regular contact around all the projects which are working on across their health and safety aspects, and as the leadership teams get together regularly and discuss strategic items also, and likewise yourself and David and the Mayor get together.
And the other thing I'd add to that, Madam Chair, is last Wednesday, should I say, was the company's AGM, and was very detailed Chairman's report and CE report that followed that, covering a wide range of aspects of the company's operations.
So, do you want to make that?
Yeah, well, just a quick commentary too, and Lisa, something that came out of that was that you probably should have been at that AGM, and it's a discussion we had and post that meeting, and said, and that would aid the process as well, and it's an oversight by all of us, I guess, but I think that would be beneficial, and you'd get that level of assurance. I would have asked that question. Yes, yes. So I think that's something to put on our actions list for the future. So yes, still moved. Yep.
Seconder for that. Shane. Thank you, Shane. All those in favour? Right. Okay, major projects.
Good morning. I'm just presenting the report for October. We start off on page 94 with the Aquatic Centre. The activity there is it will be completed in January 2022, an extension of 1 month due to the pipework issues that they had discovered under the existing pool, which have now been resolved. So January is still the finish date. The risks to this project is it's coming to an end, with the exception of the any COVID restrictions and the interest rates. Everything is now trending down to low because there is no reason to believe that we're going to have shortages of materials or we're going to have problems with staff or anything like that. So that's a good thing. The biggest problem that I have, and I've increased it, is the risk of COVID in the future and what it will actually have, the effect it'll have on our operations rather than on the capital. So we're actually got a transition here from we can turn around and say, yes, the project's finished, but we have to recognise that there is going to be an ongoing effect of potential COVID lockdowns. If we suddenly had a large outbreak here in Canterbury, I'm pretty sure we'd get locked down pretty quick, which will stop the people attending the pool. So that's just something that I'll be talking to Douglas and his team, and we just have to work through that, but we have to recognise it at this point. On the financial side, the variations are going to exceed budget by about 600,000 or 615,000, and that's due to items that were missed out of the original tender, and prolongation costs as the project has been delayed. We still get costs being incurred by designers and engineers and with the professional fees side of it. And I've also included a provision for $120,000 as an allowance for as yet unpriced variations, because we're now coming down to the end of the contract where the quantity surveyors and the contractors are getting together to sort out the total variations, and we'll get offset by credits because we haven't used PC sums or anything like that. So I've allowed 120,000. We may not spend that money. TRRT on page 95. The fit out and the code of compliance are on track to be completed by November, and I believe there is an opening ceremony this afternoon, so that all is obviously on track. But this is at the end of October. The risks, once again, are the same. They're all trending down because the contract is coming to an end, but we still have these ongoing interest rates will still go up. We've still got carrying costs of loans and what have you against the project, and we still, if we get locked down, will people be able to go to the into the library? So we've got to we're mindful of that. The financials of it, the construction and fees variations are expected to exceed budget by about 940, and that, but the construction variations are going to come in under budget. The professional fees are all up due to prolongation, facade testing, and consultation with contractors, staff, and others on. As we get charged an hourly rate, which there was no provision for that actually in the budget. So it just is an add-on which happens. It's nice to have professional fees or professional help in a lot of these things, but it does cost. The Roslyn Town Centre infrastructure roading and car park, it's called stage 2 on page 96. It's only 1 month into the build, and we've already got most of the water and sewer actually in place. There's no change to the risk trends since last reporting, with the exception of future COVID restrictions. This could affect the ongoing project if we happen to get locked down in February, March, something like that. I'm very pessimistic about the whole COVID side of things. As new variants come out of the woodwork, we don't know the effect that that's going to have on us, and we seem to have a much delayed entry into these, or everyone else gets over them and moves on. We're still struggling with it. So I believe we will still have some problems in the future. The area around Tiaratia on page 97, it's part of the town square. It's nearing completion in time for the official opening tomorrow or this afternoon. But there is stages 2 through to 4. So it's quite a large project. And the rest of it's still in its design phase and is out for pricing so that we can match the pricing with what we've had in the budget. The risks are the same as, I'm repeating myself here, but the COVID is the largest risk we've got in all of these projects. And the flow-on effect of any project starting now with a COVID event will affect material supply. Our supply chains will be compromised. So we do have to look hard at these things and monitor them constantly. The reserve development, the Century Garden. This is another one which is part of the opening of Tiaratia. It's a project that's gone very well. The risks are now minor, and there isn't a COVID effect on this one because it's just part of the reserve development. But it will come in slightly under or on budget, which is a good thing. The artificial turfs on page 99, that has commenced. The COVID restrictions once again are the same, but the financial side of stuff is we've spent the design fees, and we will start to get costs coming through from the contractors. Prebbleton Reserve Development, page 100. This project's in its early stages. Installation of services, sewer, water, comms, and earthworks. That's all underway. This has a medium to high COVID classification because we don't know how this is going to. Any event may affect the project and extend the time. The financials, it's all the costs at the moment are just purely design fees, and there's one early construction cost which has come through. But all these projects which are in their infancy will start to form part of getting the information for the PIRs and what have you, to make sure that we have it all on hand, rather than what is happening at the moment is we're totally reactive. We say, right, let's do a PIR, then you start digging around in the records to find out where the feasibility studies were and what have you. So it's very good that this is that we've gone through this whole review, because it's highlighting areas where we can actually do a lot better. Pines 4, page 101. It's been designed by MWH, and that's complete, and we actually ordered our manufacturer of critical elements to the clarifier through a firm in Auckland. It was just as well we did, because they got locked down and couldn't manufacture, but we're 80% complete, so it's not going to delay the project. I think that we've got to be very mindful of our projects where we see a supply chain could be compromised. That expenditure earlier on to establish that we do have materials is most important, and because that flows on to the Darfield trunk sewer, or the Pines Darfield Pines connection. Currently, we are 19.3% through the laying of pipe, which is 5.11. The latest report said we're 34%, so that'll get reported next month, or whether you guys won't see the report, but I'll write a report for it. So, and the 1 week's lost time reported last month has now been brought back through to the establishment of 5 crews. They're all working well, and they're only 1 to 2 days behind at the end of October, but that will now be brought back, which is good. They are at risk from COVID, as mentioned in the SciCon report, of having to work within the confines of a restricted environment. In the financials, I mentioned this last month. I believe that we will be required to spend about 20.5 million round figures under the current budget. The approved budget is 16.96, but I've added in professional fees 1.27. The provision for the purchase of land for the Kiwi pump station is 220,000. I've added that in. Recognition of pre-construction costs and the provision for a contingency, which makes up the difference between the 16.96 and the 20.4. So, and that's at this point. So whether I think with the buffer of 1.8, we've got a chance of making my estimate, but that's not what's been approved. Gareth has confirmed he's hard on SciCon's heels. They're not allowed to have contingencies. They have to find savings. But I've never met a contractor yet who doesn't have variations. So we will use... Sorry, Murray. Yeah, it's an interesting one. It's a good project, and it'll be quite a good one to report a PIR on, because once it's finished, it's actually we don't have to wait 6 months or a year, because it's strictly we're sticking pipe in the ground and building a pump station. Just on the pump station, Gareth has informed me that we have done everything that we can to procure the land. We've finished the design of the pump station, but it's still with the willing buyer, a willing seller. So until he signs a piece of paper, we can't buy the land. So we're left to his mercies. But that's all being negotiated by Gareth and his team. Springs Marsh Roundabout on page 103. Its construction's well advanced. You recall that they split the contract in half for that. With building that roundabout, they completed the south side and are doing the north side at the present time. The risks from COVID are pretty minimal at this stage because it is well on track to be completed at the correct time and by late November, early December. So I don't think we've got a problem there. The project is forecast to be 850 over budget, additional professional fees due to prolongation. Management of enabling works was not included in the original tender. So that's regarded by me as scope creep. And we had a late issuing of resource consent, which pushed the whole construction period into the winter time where we start getting extensions of time because of rain and what have you. Once again, something we can learn from this particular project is that if it's putting anything to do with roads or putting items in the ground, they've got to be done during the right seasons. Otherwise, we're just dead in the water.
Mm-hmm.
Any questions?
Yeah, a couple of questions, which might be my dumb questions for the day, but just starting with Te Ati, yeah? Oh, thanks for your report too, by the way. So the funding shortfall we've got listed here, 1.16 million, and I just looked at last month and it was 1.49 million. I just wonder why there's the difference.
It's just so as we're finalising the account, some of the variations are not coming in as high as as I estimated. It's easier. Hindsight's wonderful. You know?
No, but it's good to overestimate and be going downwards than going up the other way.
Yeah.
So that's good because
I'm trying to get the quantity surveyors to actually start looking at the unpriced variations from day one rather than at the 11th hour, which is the way they traditionally work.
Now, I might have just missed on talking about the Darfield pipeline. So you've got the five crews working on it. So does that mean they're actually going to be working 5 times faster?
Depends on the type of ground they're working in, and there is, in the initial stages, the new crews take longer to learn, but by the time they're all completely trained, they should be putting it in the ground as fast as the environment will allow them.
Because I'm quite obviously conscious of time frames that we're looking at now. I mean, you're saying you're a month behind and you're reporting really to us, isn't it?
Yes.
So, I mean, we're looking at end of March. Just want clarification on this. So the money from the government just has to be spent by then. It's not the project need to be completed by then, but what sort of proof do we need to give them? I mean, obviously, because March is coming up pretty fast.
We've already had a DIA audit. They actually went on site and they were quite surprised. We're one of the few councils that are actually doing something for the money. Yeah. So we responded to any of their questions and are quite pleased with the way things are going. SciCon assures us they'll have spent the money by the end of June, but it does make sure that we are actually on the case all the time to make sure they are. And we get fortnightly reports from the project engineer, Gareth Taylor, and Gareth Morgan responds to that with his questions. So we're on the case pretty well on this.
Yeah, because there's also the, obviously with sourcing the pipe, when we visited Pines, that was what was raised. And that obviously with the plant shut down over Christmas and such like. So there's still potential issues.
Yeah, the sourcing of the pipeline will actually swallow up most of that 10.6, but what is quite noticeable up and down the country, as Craig has just alluded to, is the amount of that money that's not being spent and won't be spent. But we're 100% confident as well.
So DIA might not be so hard and fast on their deadline.
Well,
They'll be hard and fast in the deadline, but we'll have spent the money by then.
Yeah, but just as long as we do, but I mean, if there's so many that aren't going to meet it, because the whole thing is trying to give everyone a leg up in these projects.
We'll take the money.
Yeah, we could. Yes, actually we could. Thank you.
Shane?
Kia ora, Craig. Thank you very much for your report. PIR, Madam Chair, must be just about music to your ears now. Gets mentioned a lot, and well done, and thanks for your comments around that, Craig. How many of the projects within our major projects will be looked at retrospectively by or taken on board by the PIR system that we're putting in place? And I would expect it to be Te Ara Atia, SAC, and a few of the other ones that have run up quite a significant cost variations. So page 94, and that is, sorry, just bringing it up here, that is a Selwyn Aquatic Centre extension. Whilst I believe that maintenance and cost variations due to build are acceptable, I don't see the insurance, the excess exceeded budget by $615,387 in original contract plus insurance fees and cost of extensions of time professional fees, $390,000. Surely that should be our bread and butter, and we should have accounted for that before we missed that. Page 95, the professional fees again, $1.55 million due to prolongation of fees. You mentioned COVID as a risk, but is COVID also a factor? A lot of the costs associated with the variations within the general rate are due to professional fees and consultation fees. Page 102, sorry, I'm just getting to it. The Starfield trunk sewer, and as mentioned before, when I asked about an action point, I see here that it is work in progress around the purchase of the land. But asking our, asking our contractor that contracted on and won the tender to take this project on, we're now asking them retrospectively to go back and cut the 10% out of their costs. I don't see how that's possible from their end for a start, but why was this missed in the first instance? Craig.
Your first a lot of questions, Douglas can answer those, and Gareth, can you answer the question on the trunk line?
When anyone you put out a design for a project, you indicate to your consultants who are tendering for your design, and just say hypothetically, we think we'll need you for say 12 months worth of design work, and then we'll need you, just say hypothetically, for 12 months worth of contract management work, and we might need you for another 6 months worth of whatever work. Just that, very simplistically like that. And that is to make sure that your experts tender in a way that's consistent. Because if you don't give some indication of that, you end up with either pricing that's got plenty of fat in it to protect those parties from not making money, or secondly, they give you a bare bones price and then tag that pricing for you. So our problems at Te Ara Atia and SAC with fees are sort of twofold. We've ended up, and I think Te Ara Atia is probably the best example. We started down a process where we thought, and again, just say hypothetically, because there's a big table of documentation that has been supplied, we think we need you for 12 months, but we spent longer than we expected going through that design process, consulting and engaging longer. So what has happened is that that your design people come to you and say, well, you told us it'd be this. They make a claim. You have to consider whether the claim is right in terms of the tender they provided, and you come to a conclusion. Yeah, so that's just a very general comment. Secondly, same thing with COVID. You end up with a situation where it's taken longer. Yes, they're doing work. Again, it's how these documents are worded as to what they can and can't claim. And one of the things that we've looked at a number of times now is, just say hypothetically Te Ara Atia, should we, instead of saying it's going to take us 18 months of design work
and we spent a lot of time going back and forth. Should we have said at month 17, no, council, we're not going to listen to any more discussions from the community, we're going to get on and do it, or do you take a longer? And there's no right or wrong answer to this. This is why the PRI is going to be quite an important process, because you may find, hypothetically, with Te Aratia, if we'd been a little bit more realistic about our design length and that type of thing, we may have had a budget that was higher. We may not have been happy with that. We may have finished bang on budget. So these are the type of dilemmas, and these are the things the PRI process will explore and try to give us a better fit for going forward. I mean, the insurance issue, yeah, we'd like to have told, hypothetically, the contractor, I know it's up to you, but actually we've lengthened it out and we need that insurance cover. The other type of challenges that the PRI process will work out for us and give the organisation, better guidance going forward. There's arguably right and wrong reasons to the answers here, but that's just sort of the reality. Yeah. There are other issues about contract where you look at a design and you say, we've got a couple of issues. Well, we've got a few issues at Te Aratia at the moment. And then the question becomes, is that the fault of the designers or is that the fault of the contractor? And that's what we have to work through and make decisions under the contracts we have. So that's just a general comment from me. It doesn't specifically answer perhaps everything you're wanting to know. I just say there is water going into the last pool currently. I know, Denise, it might even be full. So really our risk at SAC is pretty well down to nil. And obviously we're opening tonight at Te Ara. So a bit of finishing work. A lot of those outside project works, we've got, clear understanding what the designs are going to be. It's just a matter of making sure our pricing's within our costs. So, yeah. Thank you, Gareth. You want to add to it?
Oh, brilliantly put, Douglas. Similarly to Douglas. Yeah, Councillor. Similarly to Douglas, on the pipeline, you will recall that when we initially brought the award of the SICON contract to council, it was explicit in there that there was simply no contingency, and there was two choices to be made. But we were up against time delays to meet government deadlines. We're up against time delays to meet population growth in Darfield and get this pipeline in. So we could, at that point in time, continue to negotiate with SICON, but we would delay the project to go. At that time, when SICON presented their contract costs, there were a number of items within that contract which were still open to negotiation. So that's where Craig refers to the savings that traffic management costs, for instance, where road closures would remove traffic management costs. Those things were still to be developed, and which have been driven hard through SICON to say, is there opportunities still for us to make savings in what you have presented? That's not to say there won't be variations. We're putting 26 kilometres of pipeline here across 2 rail crossings, across 2 state highways, some deep excavations, hard up against road seal edges. There will be variations. And they're starting to filter through, and we're starting to have those tense conversations about those. So it's not a question of we've missed 10% in the SICON contract. We didn't at all. It was a question of there was still elements in there that we want to identify cost savings before we talk about anything further.
Thank you. Thank you,
Yes, look, I've got a couple of questions. One, I'll look at Te Aratia. There's a funding shortfall of the 1.16 million, and it's going to be met through the targeted rate at libraries. And I'm just wondering, with regards to that shortfall, how long is it going to take the general rate to actually pay back that amount of money out of the libraries? It's out of the general rate.
It's not a general rate. It's a targeted rate.
It's a targeted rate. That's what I mean. So I'm just asking.
I don't know just yet because that figure is not finalised.
Okay, so
Short answer is it depends on how much you want to increase the rate by.
Yeah.
Each year.
Okay.
Normally over a longer period of time.
Okay, so so we're looking at a rate increase in the library to cover the 1.16 million, basically.
Mm-hmm.
The other issue is, with regards to this building, is the ongoing maintenance costs. And Councillor Miller said, well, you've designed a iconic building. It looks very nice, but when we actually undertake some of these projects and the designs, do we actually consider climate change, material costs, ongoing maintenance costs, and into the project itself when we're actually looking at the early stage of a business case or a feasibility case of actually taking on that particular design? Sorry, Douglas, that might be a good question.
I hope it is.
No, it's just that I'm really, really concerned about the ongoing maintenance costs of some of the designs that we're actually using as anchor projects. And I just wonder, given that we do have a shortage of resources, we do have COVID, we do have a whole lot of other worldwide issues that are affecting us, whether we can actually in our business case move into actually building what is the most economic viable building process that we can actually build in to say, you know, do we need this iconic building, or is there something else that we could actually deliver on that does the same but is more practical and more meets the area of addressing issues around climate change?
Deborah, that's a question that we don't ask at the end of a project, but rather as part of the feasibility at the front end of a project. So need to satisfy ourselves. We're very good at identifying capex costs, but through the conversation in the last 20 minutes, there have been a number of questions around maintenance, around other related stuff. Question that we have, and it's not for debate today, but at the start of the process, that's what you ask. It's feasibility related questions.
Murray?
Yeah, David, you've stolen my thunder, really. I'll just refer back to Kelvin's paper on the project initiate, and it's part of the initiation, isn't it? It's we approve a project, and we approved a project, and we had it sitting in front of us, and we approved it. What we're talking about now is the delivery. So I think that it only adds weight to the fact that we have, as governors, have to do our job at the start of it and make a clear decision. I'll move the adoption of the report.
Just a couple of things from me first. Yeah, with all the commentary and questions, I guess, and the detail of those projects, again, alludes to that PIR can't come soon enough. So I've sort of stepped away from asking the detail of the projects, and I'm waiting for the PIR to come through. So it's great for you to be able to listen and absorb all of that. I do have, and again, it's, you know, it might need to wait until that PIR is completed to see what that next phase of what good looks like in project reporting, but it's around the risks. And as I said, Kelvin did a great job in developing this template, the dashboard. But if you look at the risks from project to project, they're all exactly the same risks. So that you'd actually say, and they're right, they're absolutely real risks, but these are the risks to the program of projects. So it's almost like when you move through that phase of what the next phase of project reporting looks like to management, to the Audit and Risk Committee, do we need a program dashboard which can show you that portfolio impact of all of our projects, including these risks? Because what I would, you know, if you take one project, for example, the Aquatic Centre, those risks are very relevant to that project, but I don't feel like I have a real understanding. The project's finished now, but I didn't really get a real understanding of what the real risks were to that particular project. And that may be too when we work with our new health and safety person as well, because as we move through the phases of the life cycle of the project, there will be risks in the initiation phase, definition phase, planning phase. There'll be risks in the execution phase, and those risks should drop off. So every month, or at least, well, not every month, but every quarter, we should be seeing new risks to that project. So it might be the solution, you know, I'm not here to give you the solution, but the solution might be that we need a program dashboard that captures all of this, and then we can really focus on the risks for each project. So I know Calvin's looking at me going, yeah, I know that. But yeah, it's just next phase, something to think about. And thank you for my trending of risks. It's great. So good to see where those risks have been moving. So without further ado, Murray, I'll take you up on your mover of the report and someone to second. Thank you, Nicole. All those in favour? Aye, great. Now I'm not going to forget this hui, saying we've done the great action of an actions listing. So can we please, Naomi or Therese, go back to the actions register and just do a quick whip through of the ones that we think we can cross off to make sure that we're happy that we've had a draft sensitive expenditure policy done. The PIR, that's done. We've got a new action probably for the next quarter. Health and safety system selection.
Yeah, I'd suggest that's been done
Moved or
because
done?
that's an internal matter that's been completed. Cyber attacks we're dealing with in committee.
Yeah.
PIR framework is actually being developed.
Business case framework. Do we need to move the date on any of these or?
No.
Leave it there.
Yeah.
Project report actions to include in the future major project reports, risk state. Oh, yep, so we've done that, cross that one off. Site visit schedule.
That's what we raised earlier
Yeah.
today. Workshop we
Yeah.
raised earlier today. And Psychon AGM we raised earlier today.
Everyone happy their actions have been reported? Great. Can I have someone that moves us into public excluded, please?
Bob.
Thank you, Bob and
Deborah.
Deborah. Great.
You want to pause a couple of minutes, Steve?
Pause, couple. Yeah. I need to go.